Hello, everybody. Welcome once again. I hope you had a great week and we are achieving our dreams and also that our businesses are growing and yes, that we're doing big things out there. If you have any comments that is related to what we're discussing this afternoon, you can type it in the comment section. If you have any question that is related to what we're discussing this afternoon, you can also type it in. Thank you, Themba, for joining us this afternoon. We appreciate your contribution. And you are also allowed to share this video with as many people as you would think would benefit from this discussion. Today, we are talking about mastering innovation in uncertain times. Innovation in terms of uncertainty requires a willingness to take calculated risks. So companies and individuals should create an environment where failure is seen as part of a learning process, not a setback. This is why psychological safety is so important for innovation, encouraging employees to test new ideas and approaches, even if they don't always succeed. We've been talking about taking calculated risks. I think we had a session when we discussed taking calculated risk. So that's what we're talking about, where you encourage your employees to test new ideas, new approaches, even if they don't always succeed. And this fosters a culture of resilience and adaptability. It also allows teams to explore various avenues, learn from their experiences, and continuously improve. And in this talk with Themba, you will discover how to master innovation in these uncertain times. And before we proceed, would want to respond to some two questions that have come through on our chats. Yes, we've got a question from Umajela, who is based in the USA, and she wanted to ask Themba what he thinks about investing in cryptocurrencies and gold. I'm not sure whether they want to first to address each question, because I've got two questions, or I just ask both questions, then you address both of them at once.
I think you can just ask the two questions. I'll address them all at once. But before you ask the second question, Tafadzo, let's just remind our viewers and our listeners, particularly those that are listening for the very first time, that this presentation is about two themes. We talk about personal finances, and we believe that if you implement the ideas that we share on this platform, you should be able to retire in a period less than 5 years. We also talk about entrepreneurship quite a lot because we believe that entrepreneurship contributes to positively within the society. So I just wanted to, for our viewers to be reminded what we are all about. But you can ask the second question, Tafadzo.
Okay, the second question, Tendai from South Africa asked last week, we're talking about AI integration in small businesses. So he wrote a comment, which I only saw after. He says, will robot lawyers be winning all cases in this AI revolution?
So I think let's deal with the second one because it's the easiest to answer. Last week we were talking about AI, and Tendai is asking a question there: will robot lawyers be winning all the court cases? Look, AI will obviously revolutionize the legal profession. There is no question about that. But however, complete replacement of lawyers by AI is unlikely in the foreseeable future. The reason for that is that for one to be a very successful and a good lawyer, it involves things such as building relationship with clients, understanding their unique needs, and providing personalized advice. And it's not something that AI can do at the moment. The legal practice involves even things such as adhering to certain ethics, strategic thinking, making sure that you keep affairs of a client confidentially. And at this stage, we are not, at that point where robots can completely replace, lawyers. But who knows? Who knows? With the pace at which technology is changing, anything can happen, but definitely not in the foreseeable future. Although I'm aware that within the legal profession, lawyers are embracing AI as a tool to do research, as a tool to improve certain automated tasks. So that deals with Tendai's question. The second question was around investment, and that came from Umajela. Before I answer that question, Tafadzo, just a reminder to our listeners and to our viewers on some mistakes that people make with investments. I've made these mistakes myself. Mistake number one, people fail to diversify. Diversification is essential in investments. So, I'm saying this as part of answering the question that Umajela asked. I do not want you to have a portfolio all comprising of cryptocurrencies, a portfolio comprising only of gold. Diversification is very essential. On this show, we've spoken about what we call asset allocation, which is also, in line with diversification. And our view is that when it comes to assets such as gold and cryptocurrencies, you shouldn't have an allocation which is more than 10% of your portfolio. So gold, cryptocurrencies, that exposure in your portfolio should not be more than, should be 5 to 10%, and I'll explain why. The second mistake that people make is that sometimes they make investments based on past investment success. So if you hear that somebody has made money in cryptocurrencies or in gold, you immediately go there. That's not how investment works. So don't chase investments based on past winners, because sometimes that historical performance may not necessarily replicate itself in the future. The other mistake that many people make, and this is very important, never invest in something that you do not understand. The people that make money in cryptocurrencies understand how cryptocurrencies work. And this is very, very important. Never invest in something that you don't understand. Before you go into cryptocurrencies, make sure you understand how the money is being made. Make sure you understand what that asset class, is all about. So let me now go specifically, to the question. Is cryptocurrencies, is gold a good investment? Let's start with the cryptocurrencies, Tafadzo. Cryptocurrencies is a very volatile asset class. It goes up and down, sometimes very rapidly. Cryptocurrencies, in my view, and the whole technology behind cryptocurrency is something that is a technology of the future. So there is no, if you look at blockchain technology, in my view, it's a technology of the future. There is no question about that. But before we get to that future, there will be a lot of volatility. So that's why we advise people not to have more than 5% of their portfolio invested in cryptocurrencies. We do encourage some exposure, so that you start having some exposure to cryptocurrencies. When it comes to gold, for your own information, Tafadzo, and I was going to mention this in our news update. In this past week, gold reached its highest price ever. I think it's about now $2,700 per ounce. So the price of gold has been increasing, and it happens especially when the world is worried about a number of things. At the moment, the world is worried about geopolitical conflicts. The world is worried about the elections in America. The world is worried about a number of things. And therefore, the price of gold has been increasing, which means that those people that have had gold in their portfolio are actually smiling all the way to the bank. And our advice is do have exposure to gold in your portfolio. Traditionally, gold has been a safe haven asset. So you'll actually see that when there is quite a lot of concern and worry in the world, people tend to go to gold and the price of gold goes up. And that's why, we don't advise people to have an exposure of more than, 5 to 10% in their portfolio. So we do encourage people to invest in gold, but diversification is the name of the game. That's how investment is done, Tafadzo. So that's my response to the questions that have been asked.
Thank you very much for that response. Do you have any news for this past week for our viewers?
So let's start with an economic update. The price of gold has been going up, $2,700 an ounce. And, it's been going up because of geopolitical conflict. You would know that in the past week, Tafadzwa, the Hamas leader was killed. And that has actually sparked concerns about, the possibility of a regional war in that part of the world. So if you look at it among the commodities in 2024, gold has been one of the strongest performing, commodities. I think it's gained. I would have to verify my numbers now. I think the last time I checked, gold has increased more than 30%, this year. And so if you had gold in your portfolio, you would have benefited. But like I said, you don't invest in a commodity once its price has gone up, because by then you would not have benefited. So the the most advisable thing to do here is to have some exposure, to gold, because that's very important. Another thing that I want to say as part of the economic update is we have also seen record highs on this week on the stock exchange in America. So those people that have also been invested on the stock market are also benefiting. So the S&P 500 and the Dow Jones in America is, surged to record highs in this particular, week, which is why it's always important to stay invested in on the stock market. The other thing that I want to mention, before I mention this, let me ask you a question, Tafadzo. Who's the richest African at the moment? Who's the richest person on the continent of Africa? We know who the richest person is in the world. Who's the richest person on the continent, Tafadzo? Do you know him?
The last time we spoke to us, Aliko Dangote, has it been overtaken?
Yeah, so Aliko Dangote is the richest person on the African continent. The news that we received this week is that his wealth has doubled. Imagine if your wealth has doubled, Tafazo. So he's now worth 28 billion. And the reason why his wealth has doubled, in this week, and this is according to Bloomberg, by the way, he has been building a very large refinery in Nigeria. And his refinery is now up and running. And because it's now up and running, it's now part of his portfolio. So it resulted in his wealth, essentially doubling. So he's now by far the richest man on the continent. I think in this particular week he even jogged because the person who was closest to him, Mr. Rupert in South Africa, sells luxury goods. So he actually jogged and he said he enjoys doing what he's doing. And it's better than selling bags because Mr. Rupert sells bags. But there are three things that I want us to learn from Mr. Dangote, which is very, very important. When you are building wealth, obviously stick to what you know. That's number one. I think this man has been very consistent. I've also followed him. He made his money in commodities. Commodities is what he knows and what he has been doing. If you want to make money, stick to what you know. This is a guy who understands commodities. The second thing that I have learned from Mr. Dangote is that on your pursuit to wealth creation, you will encounter so many hurdles. I've been following this building of the Nigeria oil refinery, and this guy has come across many hurdles. In fact, he has received all sorts of insults, even within Nigeria, itself. Only last month, his refinery was actually raided by the government, there. He has received quite a lot of pressure from what is called the oil mafia in Nigeria. But this guy has remained resolute. Not only is he just building wealth for himself and for his family, but he wants to make a change in Nigeria. And in fact, his idea with building this refinery in Nigeria is to solve a long-standing issue in Nigeria. You may be aware, Tafadzwa, that Nigeria produces quite a lot of crude oil, but they didn't have refining capabilities. And as a result, they were not, self-reliant in terms of fuel. They sold the crude oil to people who would process, the crude oil for them, and then they would import it back from them, obviously at a higher price. And so that's what he has been trying to do. And that, to me, is what entrepreneurship is. It's all about. It's about solving problems. Mr. Dangote has actually made it clear that he loves Nigeria, and he even made a statement that he doesn't have properties outside of Nigeria. And he wants to make a huge impact in Nigeria. And that, to me, is what drives, entrepreneurs. And so the other third thing that I have learned, the third thing that I've learned from Mr. Dangote is how he has been trying, obviously, to preserve his wealth and to diversify. Remember what we said about diversification. So in this year, he actually opened a family office in Dubai, and he sent one of his daughters there. I think it's his first daughter, Halima, to run the family office in Dubai, and is looking at doing investments even from a global point of view, diversifying out of commodities, which is what he has always done. But for those of you who are young, let me just give you some facts about Mr. Dangote. He bought his first private jet at the age of 23. He built his first mansion at the age of 33. So for those of you who would want to, benchmark themselves with what somebody is doing. So congratulations, Mr. Dangote. Mr. Dangote has got a charitable foundation, and he wants to donate millions of dollars to people. I think he has made a commitment to give about 10 billion, over time. And I love that about him. His daughters are actively involved in the running of the business. He's got a grandson who is finishing university next year, and he wants to hand over the business, to them. So he has actually said at some point he will hand over. So there is a lot to be learned, lots of entrepreneurship lessons to be learned from Mr. Dangote. The third thing that I would want to talk about is water, Tafadzo. We did mention in previous shows that the next crisis in the world would be a water crisis. Water crisis. So for those of you who are thinking about innovating and making money and solving issues that Africa has, I think water is an opportunity for us to really be, innovative. Three things that I want to say about the water crisis. Number one, I was reading somewhere which says we're in Johannesburg, Tafadzo. Johannesburg alone loses 44% of its water, either to leaks or to theft. Right, that's a huge problem there. And entrepreneurs should be thinking about what to do. I also read somewhere where drought hit Algeria. There is a drought in Algeria at the moment. Is actually planning to to make drinking water from the sea. As you know, seawater is very salty. So they've earmarked something like $5.4 billion to make drinking water from the sea, and they plan to build desalination plants throughout the country because climate change is actually affecting water. But the reason why I'm talking about water, Tafadzo, is there was a report that was published this week. It was actually released on Wednesday by the Global Commission on the Economics of Water. And that report actually finds that nearly 3 billion people in the world are in areas that are experiencing a worsening water shortage. And that this water crisis that we are staring at will actually reduce GDP by something like 8% in high income areas and potentially reduce GDP by 14% in lower income areas. So that's a very interesting report. And it's all because of the climate change that we are seeing, the deforestation that we are seeing. And that's a huge opportunity, right there for entrepreneurs who would want to solve problems. The point that I'm trying to highlight here, Tafadzo, entrepreneurship is not about just making money. It's about solving problems. And then as you solve those problems, obviously you will make money. And then let me just talk about this probably as the last thing, since we are talking about innovation today. The city of Johannesburg has got an innovation challenge for everyone who lives in the city. So they've launched what they call the Smart City Community Innovation Challenge and Award for 2024. We're talking about innovation, Tafadzo. And just as I was researching on innovation, I just discovered that here in Johannesburg, the city is inviting innovative ideas from the inhabitants of the city in terms of how they can improve municipal services and improve infrastructure. So they will be giving out 1.1 million rands to people who submit very innovative ideas. So if you are placed first, you receive 300,000. If you are placed second, you receive 200,000. If you are placed third, you will receive 100,000. And it's all about promoting innovation. It's about driving economic development and making sure that citizens are engaged in solving the problems of the city. The reason why I'm choosing this is because for some of you who are running companies, innovation is an imperative. Innovation is a culture that must be embedded in the business. it may actually be good to invite your employees, your colleagues to submit innovative ideas. Never assume or operate on the basis that the entrepreneur is the most innovative person in the company. What we are seeing is not only cities inviting innovative ideas, but companies do the same as well. And the innovative companies are coming up with initiatives, and those initiatives are coming from employees, and you need to reward, innovation. So that's a good thing then. Somebody who submits an innovative idea would need to be rewarded. Let me stop there with my update, Tafadzo, so that we can move on.
Thank you, Themba. My next question I was going to ask without this jargon, what innovation is. I was just thinking, you mentioned earlier that you mentioned earlier that you need to be innovative in something that you know. My question was, if can someone learn about the new product and they excel in it? Like I'm also thinking of Dangote's son. Would Dangote's son have to innovate because it's going to take over the business that's already there? So they may have an advantage of riding on shoulder of the big man. How then do we reconcile? Because Dangote's son is on an upper hand already. The foundation has been made. It's been created for them. And someone is starting from scratch, who's not inheriting anything. What do they need to do maybe to be innovative? Because they're starting from nothing. And when you say you innovate from something that you know, if you're starting from nothing, how do you innovate from something that you know? Yeah, I hope I'm making sense.
You're making a lot of sense, Tafadzo. So let's just make something very clear here. Everyone needs to innovate. Innovative is an imperative in business at an individual level and even for established business. So you mentioned Dangote's grandson, who is in the reason why we're mentioning Dangote's grandson is that the people who are running his business are all his daughters. I think he's got about 3 daughters who are actively involved in business. And the only male is a grandson, as far as I know. That's why we're mentioning his grandson who is in. But he himself, even if he were to take over the business, he would need to innovate. If we were to define what innovation is, Tafadzo, the definition of innovation is very simple. It's actually making something better. That's what innovation is. It's not a complicated, definition. It's making something better. So think of, Dangote's grandson inheriting the business. He has to make it better because the environment that we are living in is a fast-changing environment, which can be overtaken by event. Who knows? They are refining oil in Nigeria and he has built a very large oil refinery. What if oil is beginning to be produced somewhere in China at a much cheaper cost, and which will render his own refinery expensive? The people in Nigeria are not bound to his large refinery, and that may render the whole thing worthless. So whoever takes the business, obviously they start at an advantage, but would need to do something better. Right, that's what innovation is. Innovation is doing something better. That's the one aspect of the definition. The other aspect of the definition, which is also important and which distinguishes an invention from an innovation, is that you make something better in a way that creates value. In other words, your bettering of something must have commercial viability. If you just come up with an idea which is creative, you have not innovated until you get to a point of commercial viability. So the first point that I want to make there, Tafadzo, is that innovation is an imperative. It's an imperative even for Dangote's grandson. Innovation is becoming more important for small businesses that are starting. Why? Because if you look at the business environment at the moment, it's very hostile to incumbents. You go into banking at the moment, there are established banks there. You would need to innovate and to disrupt the industry. So let's just be clear here. There are people who have gone ahead of us. And if you're an incumbent in an industry, you need to innovate because the environment will obviously be hostile to you. So if I talk about the industry that I know very well, which is banking, we are seeing new players coming in who are not building branches. They are called digital banks. Everything that they do is in the cloud. They operate with apps. They've got payment systems. And so that's innovation. So innovation is an imperative to entrepreneurs. But we need to continually innovate, wherever you are. Why? Because industries are being disrupted. In a fast-changing environment, industries are being, disrupted. But we also operate in an environment which is, changing, whether it's geopolitical conflicts, whether it's extreme weather. Things are changing. We've been talking about water, Tafazo, and what is happening. Those changings, which has resulted in water scarcity, are purely as a result of climate change. And these are factors that are causing us to innovate on a day-to-day basis. So what is the point that we are making here? You will never last in business if you do not operate a business that does not have an entrenched, innovative, culture. The other aspect of your question, Tafazo, was, do you need only to innovate in areas that you know? The answer is no, it's definitely not. Innovation has got certain ingredients, and there are 3 ingredients that we'll be talking about today. Ingredient number 1 in innovation is creativity. It's very important. As long as you can come up with creative ideas, that's why creative thinkers will likely innovate much more than anything else. Another ingredient is failure, right? Failure. We'll talk about failure later on, Tafazo. Another ingredient is iteration. Try things. Some of the concepts in innovations are concepts like failing fast, right? Let me ask you a question, Tafazo, before I explain this. Is failure a bad thing? What do you think? Should we reward failure? Do we need to reward people that fail, or do we not need to reward them? What do you think?
When you say rewarding, do we reward them when they're failing, or I think maybe they can be rewarded when they've risen. When they fail, then they rise. Because if you reward someone who has failed, they may not rise up. So I think it depends on the stage and maybe why they're failing. If it's maybe beyond them and they can be helped to rise, then maybe they can be rewarded. But if they're failing, maybe because of their own making and they're not willing to grow, to change, then I don't think they need to be rewarded there, because then you are promoting low standards or mediocrity. But they need to have a desire to grow, to change in their failing state. Then if they rise up, then they can be rewarded.
That's very, very interesting. The point that I was just trying to highlight, Tafazo, is people have got a negative view of failure. We tend to punish people that fail. But when it comes to innovation, Tafazo, we need to reward failure. Obviously there are conditions. Number 1, we need to reward failure as long as that failure is, related to an innovative process. Why? Because, you are going to fail. Every businessman that is going to do incredible things is going to fail. Your employees, give them the liberty to do something. Even if they fail, don't punish them for failing. So in a business where the culture of innovation is entrenched, the manager is not going to come hard on people that try out things, right? And they fail. So we need to reward failure as long as that failure is associated with innovation. Number two, as long as people learn from that failure. Because we are going to talk about the innovation cycle and some of the ideas that have been put on the table around the whole concept of innovation. And one of the things is what we call validated learning. I have no problem with somebody who fails as long as they have learned from their failure. And so we need to ask the question, you have failed, what have you learned from your failure? If you have not learned anything from your failure, then it's a problem. And then number three, there is a concept called failing fast. Failing fast is don't wait until you've got a complete product that you think is suitable for the market. Have a pilot program, product. Go and get feedback from the customers. When you get feedback from the customers on the suitability of the product, then adjust it, pivot. In a fast changing environment, a business might actually come up with products that the market rejects, and you may need to pivot, and not necessarily, persevere. But the point that I wanted to highlight, which is all related to entrenching a culture of innovation, is that we live in an environment which is hostile to people that are, in the industry, and also to people that are entering the industry. We live in an environment where there is quite a lot of disruption. We live in an environment where there are all sorts of pressures, and therefore innovation is an imperative there. So the reason why I started asking you about whether failure is a good thing, I was explaining the ingredients of innovation. 3 ingredients. Number 1, creativity. It's always good, even at an individual level, to be involved in creative thinking. I like people that take time to really think and be creative, right? But it's not the only ingredient. Another ingredient is failure, failing fast, learning from your failure, not over investing in things because that may fail. Another ingredient is iteration. You iterate, you test this, you test that, you pivot if that thing is not working. Those are all ingredients which constitute what we are calling innovation. The reason why I'm highlighting this, Tafadzo, is that people think that innovation is an abstract concept. You just innovate out of nowhere. The point that we are highlighting here is that there is a process of innovation. There is a way that has been learned that will guarantee you not to fail as an entrepreneur. Statistics show us, Tafadzo, that 75% of all startups fail. And in this fast-changing environment, even if you start your business, there is a huge possibility that you may fail. But if you implement some of the concepts that we are talking about, and one of the concepts that we'll introduce just now is the concept of a lean startup, which is part of the whole subject of innovation. You are going to really reduce your chances of failure. Last thing that I would want to say before I hand over to you, Tafadzo. In this past week, I have been reading writings from a guy called Joseph Schumpeter. He's a very interesting character. In fact, most of what, a significant portion of what you study about innovation comes from this guy called Joseph Schumpeter. Joseph Schumpeter is even the one who introduced this whole concept of entrepreneurship. We talk about entrepreneurship. He was quite vocal and emphatic on this concept that entrepreneurs have to innovate. Part of entrepreneurship is innovation. And, Schumpeter was the one who came up with the theory of innovation, which we will elaborate on, just now. And he mentions very, very interesting things. But let's move on, Tafadzo.
Thank you, Themba. Before we go to the book of the week, I also wanted to ask, is being creative a gift? Like, are the people we have a gift of creativity? And yeah, and the people we have to follow, those who have the gift. Today, our book of the week is a book titled The Lean Startup by Eric Ries. What is the book all about, Themba?
So you've raised an interesting thing. What do you think, before I answer that question, is creativity a gift? What do you think yourself?
I think it's a gift in some, yeah, there's a gift or a talent. There are people who are more creative than others. I can, let's say, just an example, maybe a musician. They're creative. You had said innovation is making an idea better, but as in creative, if I'm understanding properly, is you're creating something from nothing. So if you're going to come up like with a song.
So let me give you an example, Chafatso. You know, there were days when bags did not have wheels. So you would be carrying your bag and it was heavy. Think of the guy who introduced wheels to these bags that we travel with. If you go to airports, you'll see somebody pulling their bag. The person who just said, look, let's just put wheels on bags was an innovator, because innovation is about making something better, right? And adding value. It's innovation is not necessarily about inventing something. It's just making something better. If you look at how the world has evolved over years, even in business, things have been better. Years ago, people used to transport things using horses. Somebody decided to innovate and said, look, let's build the railways, let's have cars. That was an innovator. So when we talk about innovation, we're talking about just doing things better in a way that has got commercial viability, because innovation has got two aspects to it. It's about making something better. It's about, doing something in a new way. Doing something in a new way, all right? That's what innovation is. And doing something in a new way, which is of value, right? I'm not just talking about something, in a new way, which does not add value. And I've given you an example of somebody who put on, these wheels, these small wheels that enable us to pull bags. And it's quite easy. That was an innovation. And so those are innovative ideas that we are actually talking about. Then your question was, are they people who have got gifts of innovation? Here is how I will answer your question, Tafanzo. I read somewhere which said that if you look at the brains that God gave us, we're probably using a fraction of our brain capacity. Right, we're using a fraction of our brain capacity. There have been numbers that have been given. Somebody said we use 10% of our brain capacity. So what am I saying? I'm actually saying that everyone is capable of innovating. Because when we talk about creative thinking, we're talking about forcing yourself to think in a creative way that has never been thought before, or that has been, that has never been considered. There is a book that I read years ago, which is called The Six Thinking Heads. The Six Thinking Heads. Probably we'll talk about that book. That book actually helped me in terms of being innovative and thinking creatively. It was written by somebody called Bono. Bono, I think his name is Edwin Bono. I read it a long time ago, The Six Thinking Heads. The reason why I'm talking about that book is he actually gives us methodologies of thinking creatively. So don't look at creativity as a gift which you are born with. No, 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 no. Your brain has got capacity to think creatively. It's only that you are underutilizing that capacity, or you do not have a methodology of doing that. So the six thinking heads, is a methodology of thinking creatively. And the reason why we're talking about innovation, Tafadzo, let me just digress a little bit. I hear people saying, you know, being laid hands on, if especially within the context of a church. And then you are told you'll be a successful business, you'll make money, you're a successful business person, you'll make a lot of money. And the question that I always ask myself, I do not doubt that there is a prophecy ahead of you for you to make money. I don't doubt that. But I also think that in as much as that prophecy is there, in as much as that word is there, you need certain methodologies and certain tools to make it a reality, right? How many people have you heard with hanging prophecies over their lives, and they're just waiting for God to, to do it for them? There is a limit to what God can do in your life. God has already endowed you with abilities. He has endowed you with, with a brain. Sometimes you just need to apply proven methodologies, because these methodologies are there for you to think creatively. So Tafadzo, the long and short of what I'm trying to say is that um, everyone can be creative. Everyone can be creative in their own areas. Everyone can innovate. And entrepreneurship more so are required to be innovative. If you're not innovative, it's going to be a tough, a tough time for you to do business. Hopefully, I've answered your question, Tafaz. Let's go to the book of the.
Munyara Zimplolo, it says here, I say innovation is a learnable skill. I say innovation is about being observant. I say innovation is about being engaged and in the moment. It's about being, it's about reflecting on the status quo.
On the status quo. Yeah, I totally agree with Mnyaradz there. He did say that innovation is a learnable skill. So I agree with that. But not only is it a learnable skill, what I'm also talking about is that a business must have a process of innovation. We might not have time to talk about it today because time is proceeding very fast. Probably next week, we can go into detail on a process of innovation and a culture of innovation. You may be interested to know, Munyarat, that most of the businesses that I'm consulting for at the moment have got a process of innovation. They have got a policy around innovation, and that policy will have things such as whoever comes up with innovative ideas will be rewarded. They've got a culture of innovation which does not, punish failure, obviously. So I totally agree with Munyaradzi. But it's not, where I would want to add to Munyaradzi is that obviously you need to be engaged. It's much more than being observant of what is happening. Because some people who have innovated, they have come up with things out of the ordinary, which have never been thought before, right? Where I agree with Mnyaradzi is, when you are observing, I hope by observation, he means that we need to get feedback, particularly from customers. The process of innovation, and particularly the process that this book that I'm talking about talks about, is getting feedback from your environment in terms of what is working and what is not working. Let's move on, Tafadzwa, to our book of the week. This book of the week, I highly recommend it to entrepreneurs who are starting a business in this fast-paced environment, particularly people who are starting significant businesses. The book was written by a New York Times bestseller, Eric Ries. It's a book called The Lean Startup: How Today's Entrepreneurs Use Continuous Innovation to Create Radically Successful Businesses. Let me just talk about some of the principles underlying this book. If you would want to do something significant in this environment, you have to be radical in your innovation, right? There are two types of innovation, Tafadzo. There is what we call incremental innovation, innovation that comes through increments. Then there is a radical innovation. Radical innovation, so sometimes we talk about a portfolio of innovation ideas in a company. And that portfolio of innovation should consist of both incremental, innovation ideas and radical innovation ideas as well. So what is this book all about? This book was written by, through learnings from Silicon Valley. Tafadzo, you would know that most of the startups, particularly from a technological point of view, have come from a place in America called Silicon Valley. That's where most of, so here they are looking at how to build a startup. You can't go the traditional way of building a startup. Have you heard of a company called Kwese Media? Kwese Media, a company that was started by Strive Masiwa. Right. What happened to Kwese Media? Do you know?
I'm not sure. I just saw it. I think, was it the one that replaced DSTV some stage competition?
Well, they wanted to replace, DSTV. They wanted to compete with DSTV, but that was a spectacular failure. I've got respect for Strive Masiwa. I've learned everything from Strive Masiwa. I wish to be like Strive Masiwa. But Strive Masiwa has started so many businesses that have failed. And Kwese Media was one of them. It was a spectacular failure. They wanted to compete against DSTV. But DSTV itself is failing because of Netflix. Netflix is coming with their streaming, technology. Why am I talking about DSTV and Netflix? If you're an entrepreneur, you are living in a fast-changing environment. From the time that you conceive an idea to the time that you would want to launch that idea, the business environment could have changed, right? So the traditional way of starting a business is that you make investments, you come up with a product idea, you build the product, and then you do a product launch. And that may take quite some time. But if you look at those 4 steps, they do not work in a fast-paced environment because your product launch may actually be a spectacular failure. At the time that Kwese Media was conceived, it was a very great idea because you're talking about somebody who wants to compete with DSTV. But as you're building that business, there is something that is changing. Netflix is coming, which is overtaking DSTV to such an extent that when you actually launch the business, that business may be a spectacular failure because it's been overtaken by events. And that's what normally happens in a fast-paced environment. So it becomes very challenging for entrepreneurs to build a startup in a fast-paced environment where technology is changing, where customer preferences are changing, where technology is reducing even the cost of delivering our services to customers. So what this book is actually talking about is that there is a practical and innovative approach to starting and managing a business. So this, practical and innovative approach is that you build a lean startup, right? A lean startup. You don't go all out and invest. You build a lean startup. This book advocates for what they call a build, measure, learn feedback loop, right? Feedback loop. Now, I want to take time. I will zero in on this concept that I learned from this book. Let's just say you want to build a company that competes with DSTV, right? You are not aware at that stage that there might be a Netflix that is coming in. You've got an idea because the process of innovation always starts with an idea. It starts with a creative idea. Innovative people must build a portfolio of innovative ideas. That's the starting point. Then you go and build. What the lean startup methodology is basically saying is that don't go all out and build a product. Build what they call a minimum viable product. A minimum viable product is a product where it's just the minimum product that meets the customer's expectations, and you build that minimum viable product which you can then test to the market, right? So you're not going to go all out and build branches all around the world with your product. No, no, no. Just in one location, build an MVP, a minimum viable product. Once you build that minimum viable product, you then test it with the consumer. So you test it with the consumer, you measure customer behaviors. Are they accepting? You collect data, you learn from that data. So it's a build, measure, and learn. You learn from it. What is it that is happening? How can I tweak my product? What do I need to do better? And then once you learn, you can either pivot or you can persevere with your product. And then you can then, scale up the idea, as long as you, getting that feedback, from the market. So that's how you build a lean startup business. And that's how businesses are being built. Tafadzo, I'm in the banking sector. I'm actually associated with a startup bank. I had actually read this book called The Lean Startup, the Lean Startup. And what was surprising to me working with a bank called Old OM Bank, Old Mutual Bank, is how they've applied these same concepts, because they are building a bank to compete with an established bank such as Capitec. Capitec itself is the most innovative bank. So you need to apply these concepts of a lean startup. And to me, it was quite interesting how everything within OM Bank is actually based on these concepts of a lean startup. So to actually summarize what the lean startup methodology is all about, because there is a concept in business called lean thinking. Lean thinking is about avoiding waste, not wasting, avoiding waste, especially in manufacturing processes. So it's a methodology. Now we are applying these same concepts of lean thinking in the way that we build businesses. So the people that have applied these lean startup methodologies have actually said that it increases the chances of success of a startup, right? So there are many principles that this book talks about, but the main principle that I have highlighted is this build, measure, learn, feedback loop, which basically encourages entrepreneurs to quickly build. So when you are launching a business, don't take time. The environment is changing. So quickly build your minimum viable product, right? We call that failing fast. The reason why you want to fail, you may fail, but you need to fail fast. So you quickly build this minimum viable product. You then measure its performance because you are testing with the customers. And then you learn from the results. That's why I said to you that in an innovative environment, you do not penalize failure, right? Failure is good. Number one, as long as it's related to innovation. Number two, as long as people are failing fast. And then number three, as long as people are learning from that failure. The lean startup methodology enables you to adapt to changing circumstances. Granted, Tafadzo, the environment that we are operating in at the moment is quickly changing. It's a fast changing environment. And therefore, in a fast changing environment, you need to be continuously innovating, right? Continuously innovating. And for you to continuously innovating, you need to embed a culture of innovation, but you need to be radical about it, very radical. Because if you're not radical, there is no way you can disrupt, certain industry. And then when you apply that lean startup methodology, which is all about, learning from the customers. So don't wait until you build a complete product. where you have invested quite a lot of money and you run a huge risk of losing, quite a lot of money in terms of the investment that you have made. What you would want is to increase your chances of success. So most of the companies that apply this lean startup methodologies have got, a great chance of success. So Tafadzo, let's make this practical. Let's just say you want to start a church, right? You are a pastor. You can apply this concept of lean startup, right? Because it's a fast changing environment. There are churches before you that are well established, but you would want to build a mega church, same size as Rema. You can apply this build, measure, learn, learn from the customers, pivot, change certain things. Is it working? Is it not working? But don't go all out and invest. And that's precisely the reason why, people. So innovation involves experimentation. In an innovative culture, people are allowed to experiment. In an innovation culture, there is rapid iteration. Even the business model itself is not fixed. One of the things that, and anybody who has started a business will agree with me. The old way of starting a business is writing a comprehensive business plan. And sometimes you get somebody to write this business plan for you. By the time the business plan is written and you are ready to launch your business, a lot of things have even changed in the external environment. That's why business plans don't work in a fast-changing environment, because they have not been tested, with assumptions from the customers. And even by the time you launch your product, a lot of things, have changed. So I like business plans myself, but I know for sure that in a fast-changing environment, business plans don't work and they do not guarantee success of business. What you want to do is to go out in the market, fail fast, pivot, adjust your business model, scale up your business based on customer feedback. So you start with a minimum investment, minimum viable product, quickly launch it to the market instead of waiting until you've got a well-structured and a thick business plan. So that's what this book is all about, Chafadzwa. I wanted to talk about this feedback loop. But for any entrepreneur who wants to build a significant business, this would be a very useful book. And these concepts in the books, in this book are being applied in the banking sector. I spoke to you about how I have seen Old Mutual Bank, applying the lean startup methodology in a banking, because I can tell you the industry is hostile to people that are coming in for the very first time. But everyone has to be, innovative. Let's go to our thought of the day, Tafadzo. We always have a thought of the day. 2 thoughts for the day. The best way to predict the future is to create it. What I see most of the time, particularly in this part of the world, we always think that there is a future that is coming, but people that are innovating know that a future can be created. In fact, this is one statement. There was a time I was studying futurism. I wanted to be a futurist, and I studied quite a lot about, futurism. And one of the things that I learned there is actually, the future is something that can be created. So people that are innovative actually create futures, right? So that's a thought that I would want us to have. Then this is obvious. It's a Thomas Edison quote. Thomas Edison is probably the greatest inventor of all time. He says there is a way to do it better, find it. And that's the crux of what innovation is all about. Innovation is about, doing things in a new way. So that's our book of the week. Very interesting book. It's a good read, particularly for entrepreneurs that want to launch this book, in an innovative way, in a way that disrupts, industries.
Thank you very much. I thought that the principles apply to business, because if it's a church, as much as you can start and fail, but if you are led, if the founder is led by the Holy Spirit, then yeah. But I think it's a discussion for another day. You had said
It's not a discussion for another day, Tafazo. Churches fail. Churches fail. And I think these are things, in my view, this can be applied in all sectors, whether you're starting a church, go out there and launch. There are people who are doing things that are innovative, but that are not innovative, even when starting a church. So innovation applies there. But our time is gone, Tafazo. Let's talk about the innovation process next week.
thank you very much. Do you have closing remarks and where people can find you? And
I think the environment is very hostile to new entrepreneurs. We need to innovate. The environment is a fast changing environment. We need to innovate. Even if you are existing in an established business, you need to innovate. Innovation is not an abstract concept. It's a skill that can be learned. It's a culture that can be entrenched within the whole organization. I was doing strategic planning with an organization, and I was quite honest with them. I told them that in this organization, you're just talking about innovation, but you don't have an entrenched culture of innovation. And that's what normally happens in this part of the world. People talk about innovation in very abstract terms. They do not understand that companies like Apple, companies like Google, actually have formalized innovation within their processes. And they've realized that, look, this world is a fast changing environment, and it is those innovative processes that keep the company relevant. At a personal level, if you are to make progress, even in your personal finances, you need to be an innovative person. Innovation is a process. It's a process right from identifying an opportunity, conceiving an ideas, to actually making it work. And we'll talk about that process next week. Those would be my concluding remarks. If you want to get hold of me, the easiest way to get hold of me is via LinkedIn.
thank you very much, Themba, for your time. And thank you, everyone who has joined us. We appreciate it. And Mnyarazi, thank you for your contribution. The Dreamers Daily Planner 2025 is now out, and I see people asking me how much it is. If you're in South Africa, it's 280 rands. If you are in Zimbabwe, we convert to US dollars, depending on where or from whom we are buying it from. I'm not sure about Zig. I've mentioned earlier that Zig missed me. So we really appreciate your support. To those who are going to get the planner, you can get it for yourself, or you can bless somebody to just improve on their productivity and to just work on their dreams. Let's dream together. Your dream is worth fighting for. Thank you again for joining us. You have a great week ahead. See you next time when we discuss about the process of innovation. Cheers.